All right, we're going to talk about running records. And I'm going to start at the very basics. It seems like there's a song about that, right? Start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. So what is a running record? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to actually administer a running record. We're going to explain what the correction conventions are and how that interacts with a running record. We're going to take a look at analyzing a running record and the kind of data that you can gain from a running record. So let's start at the beginning. What is a running record? Well, a running record is a snapshot. It's a kind of like a picture in time of a student's reading level and their reading behaviors. So it captures what a student knows at that moment about reading. It's a very good indicator. Running records capture the child's thinking when they're reading. It gives you clues into what's going on in their minds when they're reading a passage. A running record looks at the child's behavior during oral reading. There's a lot of good indicators that we can get from observing the child's behavior while they read. And analyzing the record requires analyzing all of the child's behaviors to determine what the child is thinking during the process. So it's a way for us to get a lot of good information about the child and about their reading behaviors, about what they're thinking about when they read. You got to kind of think of yourself, I don't know, as a Columbo. Do you remember what Columbo is? You're an investigator. You are gathering clues, and a running record is a way for you to gather clues as to where that particular child is at that moment when it comes to reading. A lot of times I think we feel like we can readily identify the students in our classes who are struggling with reading. We can point them out, but then we're at a loss as to why they're struggling and actually pinpointing what the actual issue is. And so running records are a great way for us to determine that. Here's an example of a running record. Small, I know. And again, a lot of this is in your packet, not all of it, but some of it is. So this is an example of a completed running record sheet. So let me kind of talk you through it. I'll point to it. I know you can't read the actual words. Over here, we have the text that the student read. Okay, so this is all the text that the student read. Notice that there are some marks over above the words. And those marks are indicators that the listener, the teacher, has marked as the child reads. So that's all markings on there. Then what we have here is a column that has an E, and that E stands for errors. So the teacher has gone through and marked the number of actual errors that the student has made all the way down. Then we have self-correct. That's what SC stands for, self-correct. Now we'll mention this quite a few times as we go through this. An error and a self-correct are different. A self-correct is actually a good thing. A self-correct is when the student makes an error and then they self-correct. Why would you consider that to be a good thing? Who can tell me? Yep. Yes, it means that they're monitoring themselves and they're thinking. Now, a self-correct cuts down on fluency, though, doesn't it? So we want to keep a record of it. It's not an ideal reading behavior, but it's not an error. So kind of remember that. We'll talk about that again. Then the next column over is where we do the analyzing. That's when we actually look at the errors that the student made and we say, I wonder what the student was thinking there. And there are three different things we look for. Meaning, I'm going to look at that error that they made. Does that error mean about the same thing as the other word? Well, that means they're using some context clues because they got a word in there that means about the same thing. Syntax is, does it make sense in the sentence, in the grammar of the sentence? Okay, that's not a bad thing. And then visual is V. Does it visually look like the word they missed? So we're getting clues here. We're gathering information. So this is what a completed running record looks like. So taking a running record. How do you take a running record? Well, the first thing you do is you give the student a text at the approximate reading level of the student and then keep a copy for yourself. So you have to have a kind of an idea of what the reading level of that student is. Now, we actually talk about this in the AACS Summer Professional Workshop. I've been doing that for a couple years. I'll do it again this summer, where we have 2 days where we get together through a live webinar, and I talk to you about how to diagnose reading difficulties. And another thing we talk about is how to determine the reading level of a student. Because just because a child is in second grade doesn't mean that they're reading at the second grade level. So we have to determine the reading level of the student. And once we know what that is, then we go and we find a passage at that reading level. There are a lot of online websites that will allow you to get a free text at a particular reading level. And I can direct you to some of those. But that's the first thing you want to do. Get a text at the student's approximate reading level. Then you give the student a copy and you keep a copy for yourself. Then you're going to sit beside the student. This is going to be a non-threatening kind of time. Probably not a good idea to tell the student, why don't you stay in during recess and we'll do a running record? Probably not the time to do it. That feels like a punishment, right? And we don't want this to feel like a punishment. So we're going to sit side by side in a quiet time. I'm going to have the student read the selection, and then on my copy, I'm going to make some notes and I'm going to mark it up, okay? So select a time when you're going to be able to listen to the child. Now you say, you haven't been in my classroom. There's not that kind of a time. So this might take some creativity on your part. Maybe it's a time where you get someone to come in, maybe a volunteer, and you say, okay, you manage this. I'm going to have some time here to administer some running records. And you just do a few a day, and you try to get through it. So select a time when you'll be able to actually listen and pay attention to that child. You're going to observe and record pretty much everything. So let's say you go to the doctor and you've got aches and pains, and the first person you see when you go to the doctor is generally the nurse, right? And you want a nurse who's detail-oriented, right? You want to tell her and you want her to mark every single thing down that you're saying so that she can take that to the doctor. That's what this is all about. You are being very detailed. You're marking down every behavior, because the more clues you have, the better you can diagnose and help the student. Then after, this is important, after you conclude, so the student has read the passage to you, you've marked it down, you have to ask the student some comprehension questions. Why? Why do you have to do that? Yeah.
Reading without thinking isn't true reading.
Right. There's a definition that I always use. Reading is decoding plus comprehension. We are really good, from my observations in a lot of our schools, at phonics. And we are really good at turning out kids who can read that passage, right? They can word call. Sometimes those same students can read a passage perfectly and not have any clue about what they just read, not comprehend it. And if that's the case, we want to know it. So that's why we administer the running record, have them read, but then we ask them comprehension questions. Because even if they read that passage perfectly, if they can't answer those comprehension questions, we've got a problem that we need to address. So that's information that we need to know. So, instead of comprehension questions, you could also have them retell the passage to you. Practice makes perfect. When you first do a running record, it seems awkward and difficult. The student's reading fast and you're frantically marking things down. The more running records you do, the easier it becomes, and you'll be really skilled at doing them. Okay? All right. So you have in your packet, I believe, a sample running record. And this is just one I use. Again, none of this is something that I have created all by myself. There are so many great resources online. You could probably find a sample running record form online to use. But this is kind of one that I use quite a bit. Let's just walk our way through it and look at some of the features. So at the top, we just have the information of the student. Then notice the accuracy. There is math in reading analysis. There's math involved. So we've got a formula here. And the accuracy formula is 100 minus, parentheses, errors divided by the word count times 100. So this is a formula that you use to determine the student's accuracy rate. Why is that number important? Well, if you look over in the top right-hand corner, we've got a little chart there. If the student's accuracy rate on that passage after you do this formula is between 95 and 100%, this text is at their easy reading level. It's easy for them. So we also call that independent reading level. If the student's accuracy score is between 90 and 94%. That's at the student's instructional level. In school, we want the students to be reading at their instructional level. The instructional level is the level that they still need a little guidance and they're still getting stretched a little bit. The independent level is what they read at home when they're Saturday morning and they're just picking up a book. The independent level is usually what we like to read. If you're reading for summer vacation, you probably want to pick up a book that's kind of enjoyable and fun, right? Instructional level is 90 to 94%, and we want to keep students in the instructional level at school. And then less than 90% on this text, it means we're at their frustration level. It's too hard for them. So this gives you an indication as to whether or not that passage you found for them, you made your best guess at what their reading level is. This will let you know if you were right. Is this where they're reading for reading level? Okay? Then over here, we've got where you put the word count. You have to count up the number of words in the passage because we need it for the math formula. And maybe the reading level. What level is this passage, just so that you're reminded. You put the text in there. You could also have your own copy and not put the text in there. Like just make a copy of the text and mark on that. You don't necessarily have to copy paste it in there. And then we've got our error column where we assign errors, self-corrects. We indicate if they used meaning when they made an error, did they use structure or syntax when they made an error, and did they use visual information. So that's kind of what the blank form looks like. Got it? Any questions to this point? I'm happy to entertain. We're all good? Okay, let's move on then. So this is some more questions. You want to make sure that you jot any notes. Students seem really distracted, or this was very difficult for them. Jot yourself some notes, just like you hope that the nurse does when she sees the patient. And then this is a place for you to maybe come up with some comprehension questions and then record the students' answers. We have to know if they comprehended the passage too. That's an important piece to the puzzle. Number 3 and 4 or 5, I'll just let you read those. Those are just questions to help you analyze what the student did and how they did on that. All right, so now let's get to the correction conventions, and I have that in the packet for you. Correction conventions are ways and markings for marking up a running record. There is some variation. You can go from one source to the next source, and there's some slight variations. But the idea is here that I could mark up my running record, and then I could give it to Bethany over here, and she'd be able to interpret what I read. That way you can get lots of people looking at this for help. So it's kind of a standardization of how to mark up a running record. So let's go through this and take a look at what the different markings are. The first one is correct response. If the student has a correct response, we're just going to put a little check mark over that word, okay? Just a little tally mark. If the student makes a substitution when they read, we want to record that. And the way we record it is you can look over there where it says, "Can you see my eyes?" They said the. And so over C, we're going to write the word the. A substitution is where they substitute a different word than the one in the text. And we want to make a record of that. An omission is when they leave a word out. And so you can look at the example is you just put a dash over the word if they make an omission. So "can you see eyes" is how they read it. So the person marking it put a dash over my. An insertion is when they add a word that wasn't in the original text. And the way I do it is just with a caret. I just add the word in there. They do it a little bit differently. "Can you see my," the reader said "big eyes." Well, big wasn't in the text, so we want to mark that down that they added or inserted a word. An attempt. Write each attempt above the word in the text. Now, this is what an attempt is. It's when they come to a word and they attempt it. "Can you see my eyes?" Okay, they got it. So I'm going to mark that down because that tells me that they were not familiar with that word. It's not an error because they eventually got it right? They said the word eyes. So, but we're going to make a marking of that. A repetition. You're going to write an R after the repeating word or phrase, and then a line back to show what phrase they repeated. So the example there is, "Can you see my eyes?" So they repeated that whole phrase. Now let's stop here. Is a repetition necessarily a bad thing? No, because a repetition again shows us that they're monitoring and they're paying attention to what they read. But does it impact fluency? Yeah. And so we want to make a record of that. We want to try to eliminate repetitions, and there's a reason why they are repeating so much that we may want to get to the bottom of. An appeal. An appeal, have you ever been reading with a student, they look up for you for help? That's what an appeal is. It means they came to a word and they didn't know and they looked at you. And so you want to make a record of that with an A. If you actually go ahead and tell them the word, that's the next one. Write a T beside the word supplied by the reader. Can you see my, and they looked at you and you told them the word. The word was eyes, okay. And so they put a mark there. So you want to record that as well. And then a self-correction is an SC. So look at the example there. Can you see my eyes is how they read it. And so the teacher put the, which is their wrong answer, and then a line, and then an SC for self-correct. Can you see my eyes? Okay? So this is all the correction conventions so that no matter who marks up the running record, the rest of us should be able to read it. Now, something to keep in mind. If nobody else is going to read your running records, you can make variances to this that you understand. For instance, sometimes I have people that don't do a little correction or a correct mark. If the student gets the word right, they just don't do anything to that word. And, you know, if it's for your purposes only and you understand what you're doing, that's fine. There's no grade on this, okay? It's for your purposes and what will work best for you. So keep that in mind too.
With the repetitions, what causes that?
Well, what's causing it, first of all, it's a good thing. What is causing it is they heard themselves and they realized, I'm not sure about that, and they go back. So they're monitoring. So it's just an uncertainty maybe. I had a student who read a whole passage and had so many repetitions but one error. And we want to move past that, and the best way is with fluency practice, where we practice reading orally over and over again. And that fluency practice usually helps with repetition errors.
If you would draw that to their attention?
Yeah, you could talk about that. You could ask them, why did you repeat that? Or you don't need to repeat that, or just kind of remind them, draw their attention to that. But it's not necessarily a bad thing because they are monitoring. They're thinking about what they're reading. That's a great question. Yep.
Sometimes I have noticed that a repetition comes before a word they're not sure of.
Yep, it's like they're gearing up. Yep, it's a little pause. That's a good point. And they're just kind of thinking about it. Good. Any other questions or thoughts? Yep, back in the back.
On your A to Z running record,
Uh-huh.
what's the structure?
Oh, are you towards the back of it? Oh, you're skipping ahead.
Oh, I knew where I was.
Let me get to that in a little bit, okay? We'll go over that. Yep.
Is there a certain length of words that they're supposed to read per grade level?
Yes, and you can find that readily available online. What you're going to Google is words correct per minute norm chart or something like that. Oral reading norm chart. And you can find a chart. Sometimes some curriculum come with that, but some do not. And so you're looking for a norm chart. That's an excellent question. So that'll tell us what a below average second grader, how many words they would read in a minute, what an average would read, and then an above average. So that's a really great question.
Can you repeat the first one?
A words correct per minute norm chart. That'll at least get you in the ballpark when you're searching for it.
Are there any that give you what it should be certain times of the year?
Yes. Yep, there are some that have early first grade, middle, and end first grade, yes. But they're readily available. I always am so thankful that it's all at our fingertips now, right? It's just having a know-how of what I'm looking for. What do I need to be searching for? Good. Any other good questions? All right. Well, let's continue then. So these are the correction conventions. So how do I score a running record? How do I determine the score? Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to count only the running words in the text. When you're counting up the words in the text, you're not going to count the titles or the subtitles or the captions. So I'm going to tally up how many total words are in the text that the student read. Then you're going to count as one error. Any substitution, it counts as one error. An omission counts as an error. An incorrect attempt, remember I showed you the correct attempt where the student said, I? That's not an error. But if they said, I, hair, or they said, hair, or something, and they made an error, then I'm going to count that. An unsuccessful appeal, So if they look for you and then come down and still can't read it, I'm going to mark that down. A told word, if you tell them the word, that's an error. And an insertion. So if they added a word in the text that didn't exist, that's counted as an error. You want to give the student a benefit of the doubt. So if there's a proper noun that they consistently say wrong the whole way through, one error. But if there's a proper noun that they keep switching and keep trying a different time, error for each time they switch. If they skip a page, oh, that's bad. But maybe don't count off. Maybe we do a redo or something like that. Give them the benefit of the doubt. We're not out there, marking down everything I can. I'm just trying to get clues. And so I want to have the most accurate reading that I can. Do not count self-corrections as errors. Those are not errors. Do not count repetitions as errors. Those are good things, although we want to move away from them so that we're fluent. A correct attempt. Let's say they looked at you and came back and and read the word. Give it to them, okay? That's fine. A successful appeal or words pronounced differently in a child's dialect. How many of you work with children with a variety of English as a first or other language than English? All right, so if this is just a dialect reading that they read the word wrong, we're going to give it to them. Give them the benefit of the doubt if it's just because they don't speak English as a first language. Number 4, if the child skips a line, count each word in the skipped line as an error. That's bad, right? Here's number 5, count a skipped page as one error. So if they skip a whole page, just one error because they made one error. They didn't turn the page. Number 6, I already told you this, count proper nouns read inaccurately only one time. Count other words read inaccurately each time. So if it's a proper noun, we'll just count off once. And then, number 7, you're going to calculate the percent of accuracy for the record by following the formula. I have the formula here, but I also have it at the top of the running record sheet. Okay, so after we've figured out how many errors they've made, then we're ready to go do our math and figure out what their accuracy rate is. And then number 8, once you have determined the child's accuracy rate, you can tell if the child is reading at their independent, their instructional, or their frustration level. And that's good to know. All right. Any questions about that? Oh, yes?
I've seen some, I found, I forget what it's called, diables or something
Dibbles.
like that, online, and they say just do 1 minute, not the whole passage. Is there
Yes.
advantage
That's
to
a good
that?
point. I think what you're saying, you don't necessarily have to put the whole passage. Is that what you're saying? Just word count. So for younger children, maybe just do 100 words if they're beginning readers. If they're older readers, maybe 200 words. But you don't have to do the whole passage.
Well, in the instructions that they say even just do 1 minute, and
Oh, okay.
after the minute's over, they're done with whatever they've read.
Well, the reason they're doing that is they're also going to ask you to figure out their fluency rate in 1 minute. So that you're doing dual purpose then there. There's nothing wrong with that too. If that gives you enough information, then that would work.
I found free in a Google search.
Yep. All of this stuff is online. And so you can find it. There's so much out there. You can find really helpful resources. Reading Rockets is a good one. Reading A to Z, although there's a paid subscription, they do have a lot that's available for free at Reading A to Z. Lots of good stuff out there. All right, how do we understand the percentages? We've discussed this a little bit. If it's easy, if that text was in their easy level, it's too easy for them. Give them a harder level next time. If it was at their appropriate instructional level, okay, that's good. We want them in the instructional level. So you should expect to see a few errors on the text if it's at their instructional level. That's not the end of the world. They don't have to read it perfectly. We want to know if this is at their instructional level. Challenging instructional level. Okay, I'm starting to pay attention to this. This was almost too hard for them. And so I'm going to pay attention. And then the hard text. If it was too hard, then we're going to give the student a lower level and see how they do on that and see what their level is. Okay? So paying attention to those accuracy rates really helps us see where the child is reading so we can adjust and go up and down and help them. A lot of times, we feel at least that we're bound to the curriculum. I don't know if some of you feel that way, where I got this curriculum and I got to get through it. And I think we need to adjust that thinking a little bit because that curriculum is not a one-size-fits-all. It does probably fit the average reader or the average student in your classroom. But God makes us different, doesn't he? And there's a variation in your class. And so we have to kind of move away from that this textbook is the only textbook, and this is, if you can't read it, oh well. No, we have to find a way that we help. What's the end goal? What are we trying to produce? Successful readers. And so if this curriculum is not helping me with that, I've got to find a way that I can help them, because I want to move them from where they are to as far as I can get them with that year that they're with me. Okay? So kind of free yourself of that and say, all right, this is not working for this student. What will work for them? Okay, let's move on then. Analyzing reading behaviors. So once you have collected the data, once you have figured out the accuracy rate, then you're ready to really delve in there and see what's going on. So let's say you have a student who made several errors. The next thing you're going to do is take a look at those errors, because the errors are what may give us the clues. Why did they make that error? So I'm going to take a look at the first error, and I'm going to say, okay, did they use meaning? Does that word that they put in there mean about the same thing as the text word? Well, if it does, then I know that they're using context clues, and that's a good thing, right? They're paying attention to the sentence in the passage around. Structural clues. Did they substitute, let's say the word in the text was a verb. Did they replace it with another verb? Okay, so they're using the structure of the sentence to give them clues. That's a good thing. And then visual cues. Does the word that they replaced, does it look similar to the word that they missed? All of this indicates to us that they are at least using the context, which is a strong reading behavior. If you're getting no for all this, no, they didn't do this, then that's indicating that maybe they're guessing. And if a student guesses at an unknown word, what can you figure out about that student? You tell me. What? They can't read it. They're having trouble with word identification. They can't decode that word. If they're having trouble with word identification, that means we got to go back to phonics. We have to figure out why they're not saying short vowels or long vowels, and we have to attack that. So you see what kind of information you can get from this? We want to be able to help them. If you're seeing trouble with, sometimes the common error is compound words. Well, I'm seeing that they're often missing compound words. Okay, so what do? We go back and teach that. We help them with compound words. Lots of good information. I think a lot of times we feel helpless when it comes to reading. We know they're not reading well, but I don't quite know exactly what to do to help them. The first thing you can do is administer a free running record. Doesn't cost us anything. And then analyze those errors to see what's going on with that child. Okay, so some self-monitoring strategies. Does the reader repeat what he or she has read as if to confirm the reading so far? We're looking for that. Does the reader notice when things don't match up? Does the reader pause as if he or she knows that? Does the reader look for you for help often? I want to kind of make a mark of that. Does the reader rely on only one cue? So is the reader only relying on meaning and not paying attention to syntax, or not paying attention to the visual cues? So they say a word, and the word they say doesn't even closely resemble the word they missed. Well, we need to talk about that, right? What does this word start with? A p sound. What word did you give me? Does that start with the p sound? And so we're talking about that. How does the reader check one cue against another? Are they self-checking as they go through? And does the reader read with phrasing and fluency? And sometimes we call that prosody. How many of you can think of someone right now who reads like a robot? No. I think some of the reason they do that is we do a lot of oral reading, maybe in first grade and second grade, and then very little oral reading after that. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, oral reading is more of a performance where I am reading so that you understand what I read. It's a skill to be practiced. So let me encourage you to continue oral reading. Now you can do it. I know one of the reasons we stop is because the discrepancy between good readers and bad readers becomes more obvious as they get older. So we don't want to embarrass anyone. But see if you can find ways where they can read the passage, practice, and then read in front of a group. Because that oral reading skill, fluency skill, is an important skill. And it's something that can be practiced and learned. All right, speaking of practice, final word on this, and I'm going to give you guys some practice. As I said before, reading equals what? Print processing or decoding plus comprehension. We don't have reading unless we have both of those parts. So it's important to ask those comprehension questions. It's important to understand what the student understood after they read the passage. Okay? All right, you ready for some practice? Yay. So in your packet, you should have a list that says packing, and it has some sentences. Do you see that? So get out a pen or pencil. What page is it? 7 in your packet? Did anybody not get a packet? Because I do have some. Okay. I have just some lists of practice sheets. All right, I'm going to make you in charge of anyone who doesn't have a packet. So these are just the practice sheets. Okay, so let's practice. You can cheat. It's not cheating. You can have your correction convention sheet out if you want it, or you can try to do it without it. I'm going to read to you, and you're going to mark it. Ready? Here we go. We're going to start with the first one. I am packing my PJs. I am packing my PJs. So on your page 7, you're going to use the correction conventions to mark that correctly. All right, you ready for number 2? Actually, let's see how you did on that. Did you do that? Yep. All right, yes, number 1, right. Here we go, let's go to number 2. Make sure I read it right. I pack my brush. I pack my brush. Ready? Did you do this? So we had an omission, we had a substitution, and then another substitution. All right, let's move on to the next one. I am packing my blue toothbrush. I am packing my blue toothbrush. Kind of look up here and I'll know we're ready to go. What do we call that? It's a caret, and it's what kind of error? Insertion. Yep. All right, the next one. I am packing my pillow. I'll do it again. I am packing my pillow. And kind of look up when you think you got it. Did you do that? Sorry for my handwriting. So we have an attempt, and it ended up being a correct attempt, right? So I give them a check mark. And then I had an incorrect attempt, but then it's a self-correct. They ended up saying it. Did you get it?
Self-correct above packing after the...
Yeah, they didn't say anything wrong to start with, so it wasn't really a self-correct. It was an attempt that they got correct. Okay, a little bit of a difference there. All right, let's go on to the next one. I packing my bare books. I packing my bare books. You ready? And then it was omitted, packing my bare books. They self-corrected that. All right, we've got 2 more, I believe. Here we go. I am packing my teddy bear. I am packing my teddy bear. All right, you can fast now. I am packing my teddy bear. So we had a repeat and then an insertion with the bear at the end. And then we have one last one here before we get to the hard stuff. And I don't think I have the correct answer for this, so we'll have to just talk it through. Here we go. I am going to a friend's house. I am going to a friend's house. All right, again, I don't think I have the right answer here. I think it's a repeat. Yep. So let's talk this through. What phrase did they repeat? I'm going. So I have an R back over to that whole phrase. And then they had a substitution. What was it? A for my. And then everything else was correct, right? All right, you're super pros. Now we're going to get a little harder. So on the back now, you have one that starts about the wheels. Do you see that one? We're going to do another passage, and it looks like this. The wheel comes off the truck. And we'll see how far we get through with this one. Let me get my reading script out here. Here we go. Oh, boy. Are you doing this a lot? I'm like, whoo. Okay. Here we go. I'll try to read it correctly. It's hard to read it wrong. The wheel comes off the truck. It rolls down the hill. Faster and faster. We're on line 5 now. Do you guys see it? Oh, maybe it's different for you. Okay, the wheel goes through the field. It rolls past cows. Faster, faster and faster. The wheel rolls through the farm. It rolls, then I'm going to look up at you as a teacher, and you're going to tell me, past the chickens. Ready?
Past the chickens.
Okay. Faster and faster. The wheel rolls. Hang on. Okay. Here, let's do that one again. The wheel rolls toward the water. It rolls over the, and I look at you, and I look at you, and I look at you, and you tell me, bridge. Faster and faster. The wheel rolls into the school. It rolls out of the door. Faster and faster. The wheel rolls through the town, through the town. It rolls past the policeman. Faster and faster. The wheel rolls into the, and I look at you and you tell me, garage. It stops rolling. The wheel is on the truck. All right. Here's what I'd like you to do. And you're welcome to work with a partner or by yourself. Go through and count up the number of errors and put a little dash mark there or a little tally mark for each error. And then count up the number of self-corrects. Just do that and then we'll go from there. So go through and look at your markings and put a tally mark in the column next to an error or the self-corrects. And feel free to talk with people around you.
It's only a self-correct if they started it wrong.
Yes, that's right. I also have a little tip for you. Where you told me past the chickens, just count that as one error because you told it to me all in one phrase. So past the chickens, that's just one error. Oh boy, we got to come back. We're almost out of time. So, did anybody finish doing the errors? Yep. How many errors did you come up with? 11? Anybody else? 9? Anyone else? All right, guess what? I got the answers on the next sheet. They have 8 errors according to them. How many of you got closer to 8? Good. So you can take a look. How many self-corrects did you come up with? 3. There are 3 self-corrects. All right, so the answers are on the next page. Then let's just hit a few of these, because remember, we're not done yet. We don't know, we don't have, oh, it was 99 words. You could go through and figure out the accuracy rate, right, if we had the time. Up here in the top right-hand corner, it says level D, the wheel, 99 words. So there are 99 words, and then you would go back to that accuracy formula, put in the number of words, the number of errors, and figure it out. And someone could do that for us if you wanted. I don't think I have that written down. Okay, let's just practice here, though. And let's practice looking at the types of errors they made. So go to the sentence that says the wheel rolls through the field. It's like your 4th sentence. Okay, how many errors do we have there? 1. And what is the error? Went and goes instead of rolls. Now let's go over and let's analyze that. Does went and goes have about the same meaning as rolls? Yes. So I'm going to give them credit for using meaning. How about syntax and structure? Does it fit in the sentence? Yeah, because they're both verbs and it kind of fits into the sentence. How about visually? Did the words they choose look like? No. So I'm not going to give them credit for that. So they are using some syntax cues. Let's do another one. Let's go to the wheel rolls through the farm. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. Okay, so we've got an error there. And what's that error? Farm. Does it mean about the same thing? Or let me ask you this. Does it really change the meaning of the sentence or the passage very much? No. So let's give them credit for that. Does it make sense structurally? Syntax. Let's give them credit. Does it look at all like the other word? Well, I guess the R, but the beginning sounds don't. So I guess it does have some similarity. So look at the answer sheet. Does the student, just look at what they came up with on the cue. Is the student using meaning pretty well? Yeah, they've circled a lot of meaning. Structure? But visual's a little weaker, right? So maybe I'm going to go back and address that and help them with visual cues. So a bunch of information that you can get from here. You can get, oh, my battery, don't quit now. You can get all sorts of information, and I think we have to quit there. Let me see if there's anything else. These might be some questions, and then we'll quit. How often do you test? You maybe want to do every student, especially at the younger levels, once a term. If you have a student who's struggling, you're going to do it more often to see if we're making any kind of progress. And then you can test the students while they're doing other activities, maybe art activities. Use teacher aides or volunteers. I know at our school we have this lovely lady who comes in and just volunteers, retired. Use them. You could potentially train someone else to do this for you. It's just a matter of being trained just like you were. So train someone else to maybe administer the running records. That would be an option too. A lot of options, a lot of ways that you can do this. And then reading groups. So once you know this, then you're better at putting people into groups to target specific weaknesses, right? Lots of information comes from a free reading tool, and you can find more information online to help you. We gotta quit. Thank you so much for coming. I hope this is practical, and I hope you can put it right to work next week.